ones who see things differently. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
How's everyone doing? Are you guys crazy enough to change the world? So I know the term Imagineer is a little bit not as well known over here. So let me explain first what that term means. The Imagineers, if you're not familiar with us, we're the part of the company at Disney that creates the theme park attractions, that designs the parks themselves. So we're on the creative side and also the engineering side. So it's half imagination, half engineer, and you get Imagineer, right? And with them, I was lucky enough to work for the company as an Imagineer for several years, and got to write bad jokes for the rides and the attractions, and my kids are still trying to figure out, you know, if I ever got a real job. And but before I do this, by the way, I always like I got to get a selfie. So everyone smile. Hang on. Okay. And I'll be sending that to everyone. No, I'm kidding. I won't be. So we're going to talk a little bit. Everyone had a long day today, right? You're ready to kind of relax a little bit. So we're going to be talking about creativity a little bit. And if I were to come out there and ask every one of you to define creativity for me, I'd probably get 100 different answers, right? Everyone would have a different answer. Creativity is important for all of us, no matter what we do. For me as an Imagineer, creating a ride or attraction for Disney, obviously. But even for you, for the work you do, to do the best work you can, to be able to find solutions to problems or challenges, you need to be able to kind of think creatively and think outside the box. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Everyone's got their glow things. Get them out, go ahead, play with them. So the first thing for creativity I'm going to have you do is everyone take out your little glow things, break them up, shake them up, get them glowing good. And have some fun with them. So take them, put them together, you know, do whatever you want, make bracelets. We got a little party after this, right? There's going to be a band next door. So, you know, we're just kind of warming you up right now. But I want you to have fun with these, and it's not going to bother me while you're speaking if you're playing with them. And, you know, I brought 400 of these from America. 400. So please. My wife's looking at me like, get a job, will you? I'm like, I got a job. So yeah, have fun with those. All right, enough with that. What I came all this way for is to talk to you about the 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA, right? What makes us creative? And every one of us has got this Walt Disney DNA inside of us. And it's what kind of helps us be more creative, and it helps us think outside the box, right? So let me go over these. Here's the first one. The first component of your Walt Disney DNA is passion. Creative people tend to be very passionate about what they do, right? If you put your mind to it, you're going to get it done. It might take a day, a month, a year, might take 10 years. But the most creative people, they've got this passion. And that passion often turns into a determination to make sure what they start, they finish, if it's something that's important to them. So passion, number one. Number two, intuition. When I talk about intuition, I'm talking about having a gut feeling, right? Knowing that something is right, but not really knowing why it's right. You just have a feeling. You guys know what I'm talking about? This gut feeling. And the most creative people in the world, they have this intuition to understand that this gut feeling they have that's telling them to go a certain way or do a certain thing is the right path to take. I'm going to come back a little bit later and talk a little bit more because this is a very important one. Number three, acceptance. The most creative people in the world have an open mind. When I talk about acceptance, I'm talking about being to accept other points of views, other cultures, other ways of thinking. This is super important in the brainstorming part, right? When you're trying to come up with a new idea. Because as they say, one of the first rules of brainstorming is that there's no such thing as a bad idea. So having an open mind and listening to other people, if someone tells me that you can't do that, it's never been done that way, or it's not how our process works, all that does is make me more determined, right? And what you're going to see is a lot of these 5 components are they're not separate things. It's a holistic system here. So if someone tells me that's crazy, that doesn't work, that just makes me even more determined, more passionate to go out there and prove them wrong. So acceptance, very, very important. Famous American singer Frank Zappa once had this quote that you see up here, that a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work unless it's open. Someone else once said, if you don't like a challenge, if you feel unlucky, then skydiving isn't for you. This is the opposite. Have an open mind. Be accepting of other people, other cultures, other ideas. Number 4, curiosity. You guys all know who this is? Right? Peter Pan, the kid that never grew up. You're kind of looking at them. My poor kids. They're so screwed up. Having a dad like me. The most creative people in the world, right, have that sense of curiosity, of being able to look at the world through a kid's eyes. And that's so important. How many of us, we start getting older and we start kind of losing that. And we get so focused on our day-to-day thinking, right, our everyday work. And you lose that sense of wonder and amazement. And my challenge to you, what I would say to all of you, is always hold on to that kid inside of you. Always look at the world, ask funny questions, look at things from a kid's perspective. I'll be coming back to this a little bit too in a minute and talking some more about that. But it's so important to always have a sense of curiosity and have that childlike wonder and be like Peter Pan. Don't grow up. People might look at you a little strange, but, that's their problem. Number 5 is emotion. The last component of your Disney DNA, emotion. Creative people are not scared to look at their emotions, to feel emotional, to be emotional, and let that kind of drive them, use them as a fuel to help power their creativity. I'm not saying you have to be like crazy, like, Rembrandt, and cut your ear off and send it, to someone because you're a tortured creative. Not that kind of emotion. Or was it Van Gogh? One of those. Anyway. And I'm like in the home, right, of the man. Anyway, I'm not talking about that kind of, you don't have to get to that level. But don't be scared to like use your emotions to kind of like power your creativity, right? I think as a matter of fact, the most creative people, they do that. They're not worried to do, about what other people think, like I said. So if this concept that I've been talking about, these 5 components of Disney DNA, kind of sound familiar to you, it's because while I put them in this format, right, what I'm telling you isn't anything necessarily brand new. This has been around, this kind of stuff has been around for generations, centuries, right? And different cultures have their own kind of versions of it. So, you can call it whatever you want. Some people might call it the great I am, nirvana, God, if you believe in that kind of spirituality. It doesn't matter. But the important thing is to just take these 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA and make them work for you. So I want to give you a couple tips here, real quick, on how to make them work for you. The first thing is, don't be afraid of self-confidence, right? The most creative people who are out there, the Walt Disneys, right, the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, well, he's a whole nother, I won't talk about. But the most creative people out there, they have a very strong sense of self-confidence. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with knowing that you're good at what you do, okay? Where it goes bad and becomes a problem is if you start thinking too much of that yourself, right? And you believe that you're like the best that you can do at everything and no one else is good enough, and you start treating other people bad. Then that self-confidence turns into like an ugly kind of an ego, and we don't want that. But being self-assured and understanding that you know that you're good and you have this self-confidence, that's a good thing. Second thing is, listen to those voices that you hear. I mean, we all hear different voices in our head sometimes. I'm not talking about the ones that are like, kill, kill, kill. If you hear those voices, we have help for you. But this goes back to that gut feeling, right? That intuition. So, if you're out there and you're hearing voices kind of come to you, sometimes it's good to listen to them, right? And kind of use that as a strength and a power and a self-confidence, and follow it and kind of see where they take you. Number 3 is to find your own path. And by that I mean, don't necessarily worry about what other people are telling you to do. Well, unless it's your boss, and then you gotta, that's a different problem. But blaze your own trail. Find your own path to get things done. Okay? Let yourself, what's in here and what's up here kind of guide you. and create a path for yourself to kind of take that creativity and channel it the way you do. Not everybody obviously exhibits their creativity in the same way, right? All of us do it in different ways. Are there any, if I were to ask a show of hands, is there anyone out there who would say they are not creative? Let me see a quick, is there anyone that thinks they're not creative? Because if you do, I'm going to come down there and probably slap you. Everybody is creative in their own way. We all have different ways that we manifest it, but we're all creative, okay? So use that, trust that. Use the gut feeling that you have. Listen to the voices and believe in yourself, okay? Believe in yourself. Don't let those voices of judgment, whether they're external voices of judgment, people out there telling you you're wrong, you can't do it that way, or sometimes it's the internal voices of judgment, not the one saying kill, 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 but those internal voices of judgment that sometimes we start hearing that tell us that we can't do it, or we're not good enough, or we're not smart enough, or whatever it might be. Okay? You have to believe in yourself. There's a really famous story of Thomas Edison, right? The guy who invented the light bulb. And when he was older, near the end of his career, a young reporter was interviewing him. And at the end of the interview, he said, "Off the record, Mr. Edison, I have a question for you." He said, "I read somewhere that you made like 10,000 variations of your light bulb before you could get your light bulb to work." And he said, 10,000 variations. He said, "How could you keep pursuing your work? How could you keep doing that if you failed 10,000 times?" And Thomas Edison, he looked at this young reporter and he said, "Young man," he said, "I've never failed one time in my life." He said, "I learned 10,000 times what didn't work." And it's just kind of like that little shift in perception, in changing how you think, right? To turn what's a negative into a positive. So believe in yourself. Trust your DNA. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a lesson about Plato. Not Plato, this stuff, I love that too, but Plato, the Greek philosopher. He had 3 ways, that's 6, right? 3 ways of thinking. 3 ways of knowing things. The first was the physical sense. Plato talked about being able to touch things, to hear, to see, smell, to use your senses, the physical sense. The second way that Plato talked about knowing things was reason. Basically, through education, through being able to figure things out, to do the math. Something I can never do. All you guys are probably great at that. I'm like, whoo. But reasoning through an issue or a problem. And the third thing that he talked about was this concept of divine madness. I don't know if you ever heard that term, divine madness. But what he meant by that is going back to the one component of your DNA that I spoke about, that gut feeling, divine madness, a sense coming from, God or beyond or whatever, telling us to do something, telling us that we're on the right pathway, and sending us down there. Not necessarily, it didn't always make sense, but it was those voices, right? So like I said, these concepts have been around for a very, very long time through different cultures and all of that. And sometimes when you've got a challenge in front of you, you need to, again, just kind of trust that you're going to be able to get through it. And it's not always going to come from the physical sense or from reasoning. Sometimes you're going to have this divine madness, right? You know what I'm talking about. And that's what's going to lead you through. So I want to kind of come to the end, and I want to tell you a little story. One of the questions that I always get as a former Imagineer is that when we were working on projects, trying to develop a new ride, when we were trying to solve a challenge that was in front of us, we never had problems. We always had challenges. So when we were trying to solve a challenge in front of us, did we ever ask ourselves, what would Walt do? And the answer to that question is, yeah, we actually did. And to this day, you know, my fellow Imagineers who are still working at Disney, it's not something that we would consciously sit down and get to a point where we couldn't figure something out and we would just go, okay, what would Walt do? It wasn't really a conscious thing, but within the DNA of the company, right, the creative culture of the company, there was always thinking back to how Walt kind of would solve a challenge. And I want to give you an example of one. So this is going back to the 1950s when Disneyland, the first park in California, was being built, okay? And Walt would go around, and he would, I'm going to sit down for a second because I've been standing all day. Walt would ask, you know, his employees out there as they were getting ready to create, you know, the park and get ready for its opening. He would go around, he was very active, and see how things were going. And one day he's taking a walk through the park, right? And on this particular occasion, he came across his landscape, the head landscaper, putting in all the plants and everything. And he went up to him and he said, hey, you know, how are things going? Is everything going okay? Are we going to be ready for opening day? And the landscaper, he looked at him and he said, well, Walt, honestly, I'm having some challenges right now. He said, I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to have everything ready to go by opening day. He said, you know, we have so much to do. He said, we'll have all of like the big stuff done for you, so there's no problem with that. But there's a lot of like little things that I just don't think we're going to get them done. And Walt said, well, give me an idea, you know, show me or tell me, you know, one of these challenges that you're having. So we walked him over to what was supposed to turn into a flower bed, right? Beautiful landscaping and everything. It was a small area, and he said, this is a great example. If you look over here, this is where we're supposed to be putting one of the small flower beds for opening day. And Walt looked at it, it was filled with weeds and, you know, very unkempt, unclean. And the landscaper looked at Walt and he said, I just, you know, I don't think we'll be able to get to these smaller jobs because we have all these really big ones. So Walt kind of walked around, stand back up here. Walt walked around for a little bit. He was thinking, took a minute. He didn't get mad. He didn't get mad. That's really important. He didn't let his emotions get the better of him. And believe me, Walt was a perfectionist, right? He was demanding. He expected a lot. He could be sometimes a real SOB to work for, to be honest, right? He could be a tough guy. But most of the time, he wasn't. He was very understanding. So he's thinking a little bit. And he said, comes back and he talks to the landscaper. He said, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to send some of your junior landscapers to the library. Have them pick some of these weeds, take them to the library, and look up in the different books what they are. And then what I want you to do is make note of what the scientific names of the plants are. And then I want you to make up these little signs. And you've all seen these kinds of signs, right? Like at the botanical gardens or whatever, that have the name of the plant. It's got the scientific name in Latin, a little description, right? We've all seen these. So I want you to make those up for the weeds and then put them in where the weeds are growing. It's a true story, and that's exactly what he did. So on opening day, when all the guests came in, they never saw a weed. They saw these amazing exotic plants that must be really important because they have these little plaques, telling you exactly what they are. Brilliant, right? That's how Walt would think. That's how Walt would think. He would not be defeated. He would take a challenge and turn it into this. Never saw a weed on opening day. So when we ask ourselves, what would Walt do? And you guys can always ask yourself the same thing too, right? What would Walt do? It's not necessarily looking for a literal answer, but what we're doing when we ask ourselves that as Imagineers is, let's kind of go back to a little bit of creative thinking and kind of step back and not be frustrated or upset or flustered or whatever you want to call it because we have this big challenge and just kind of throw our hands up. But let's kind of take a few minutes and kind of think about this from maybe a different perspective and see how can we turn such a negative thing into something very positive, right? And that comes back all the way to the very beginning where I asked, are you crazy enough to change the world? Are you? I think you are. So that's the end of my presentation on your 5 components of your Disney DNA. I would love to connect with you guys, and we're going to have a minute here to do some question and answer. But please connect with me. I love to stay connected. I like to be liked. I like to be followed. Not in a weird kind of way. I don't want any stalkers out there. But you can find me on the internet. That's all my information. And I hope to definitely be hearing from you guys some more. And with that, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. With that, I want to go ahead and open the floor up to any questions, if anyone has any questions or anything. And I think we have some mics. Yeah.
Hello, maybe unrelated to topic, but related to you. Yeah. Which rides or in which parks you collaborated?
I worked in all of the Florida theme parks, except for the Animal Kingdom. So I did the Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and the Disney Hollywood Studios. And I worked on the Jungle Cruise. I worked on Pirates of the Caribbean. I worked on the World Showcase countries. How many have been to Disney World in Florida? Just real quick. You guys got to all come. Come on. Everyone. How many have been to Euro Disney? Yeah, well, that makes sense. I'll tell you a real quick story. So I helped support Euro Disney a little bit when it was being built. And I'll tell you a little kind of, to me, amusing story. I was in California where the headquarters for Imagineering is, and they were taking me around and they were showing me like all this cool stuff that they were doing to prepare for Euro Disney. And in one room they took me, they were programming the audio animatronics, right, the robotics. And they were working on this one scene of their two sword-fighting pirates in the attraction that you can see. And as they were programming it, the guy was like, how would Walt think, right? They were getting really frustrated because robots don't really have a sense of touch or feel or anything, and they were breaking so many of the sword blades because they kept hitting each other and breaking, and it took them forever to get that programming right to be able to like do a convincing sword fight without the swords breaking. It's pretty, I think it was funny. I don't know. You guys have any other questions? No?
Do you have a good example of where you really got stuck with a certain problem? It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about some minutes and you come up with a nice solution, that's kind of nice, but sometimes you're stuck. So what did you do and how did you address this situation?
So there were a lot of times where, you know, I mean, we would definitely get stuck quite a bit trying to come up with different solutions for things. You know, there was one time where they had asked me to go into Pirates, I'll go back to Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And they said, we want to take what we've had here for 25 years, but we want to turn the experience into something kind of new and different and unusual. And they were talking specifically, they wanted to change the queue area that you go through. When you're walking through to get into Pirates of the Caribbean, it feels like you're inside like a dungeon or an old pirate's castle, right? And as you're walking through, they play this music, yo ho ho, it's a pirate's life for me, right? Trust me, after like listening to that for like 18 days, you just want to like go nuts. Almost as bad as It's a Small World. Get stuck. And I'm trying to think, okay, well, what can we do to turn this into something kind of different? As Imagineers, we try to use every sense that we can, right? Plato's way of knowing. We try to tap in. So to create an environment for our guests, we'll use sound, we'll use music, right? We'll use colors, lighting techniques, even smells. We pump smells out. So I'm thinking, what can we do different? And finally, I mean, it was a stupid, easy, silly thing, but it took me some time to figure out because my brain wasn't going there. I thought, well, this music that I've been listening to that's driving me crazy, maybe instead of playing music, we have like a pirate talking to the guests. And he's saying things like, all right, mates, keep it moving. Captain wants to see it down below. And we, have bat sounds and, projections of bats like their shadows and water coming in, water sounds. It was really fun because I got to talk like a pirate for like 3 days. People were walking by my cubicle. I'm like, yeah, right, talking to myself like a pirate. It was very fun. So it's just kind of looking at what all the different pieces of the puzzle were that I had at my disposal. And that's I guess maybe what I would say to you is look at all the different tools that you have and try to use them maybe in new and different ways to cross-pollinate, take two things that haven't been done before and put them together to make something new and different. Whether it's with like coding or programming or whatever it may be, there's always a way, I think, to find a new solution that hasn't been done. And so many times, I think a lot of people just kind of get, like I said, they get tunnel vision. You get so focused on the work you're doing and the way it's always been done, and you don't kind of stop to kind of step back and think about what's a new, different way that maybe we could do this. And that's so important to do. So if you find yourself frustrated, try that and see what happens. Yeah. Anyone else? Do I have a system of keeping notes? I'm laughing. Do I have a system of keeping notes? If you were to look at my desk, my system of I don't. And I think that goes with like the creative, my poor wife. She's a school teacher, right? Boom, 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 boom. Me? Another Adderall, please. Some more Ritalin, Ritalin, whatever. So I talk to a lot of college students, right? And this is the first time I've been asked that, like, how do you keep yourself organized, right? At the end of the day, I think it just kind of comes down to what works for you, right? For me, honestly, what keeps me organized is that I make, like I'm old school, right? I'm like the oldest guy in the room here. I handwrite lists. And of course, you know, by the end of the week, I've got like 18 slips of paper, like, you know, it could be Post-it notes or whatever, page from a book I ripped out, toilet paper, I don't care. But I just make lists, and then I've got them all on my desk, and I can't find the list that I need at the time. But it really, I don't have, you know, I have a little system that works for me. I would never tell anyone else in here how to keep their notes or how to keep themselves organized. What I would say is that it's important to find something that works for you. You know, staying organized, obviously, is super important to be able to kind of track your day and your work. But find whatever works for you. It could be, you know, pictures. It could be, there's all kinds of wonderful project management software out there. I use Microsoft Outlook a lot, my calendar, to kind of keep me organized, which is great until it crashes, and then I lose everything. So just find what works for you. Yeah.
The last one. Do you ever go to other parks and think like, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way? Or
I've had so many people like tell me, oh, you gotta go see, is it Efteling, right? Yeah, that's right. And one of the things I get to do now is I actually am a professor at the local university in Orlando, big university, and I teach courses in how to design theme parks and how to use technology in theme parks. And it's fun. I'll tell you, a small part of my work these days as a consultant with the Brainstorm Institute, only a small part of it is like about theme parks and themed entertainment. It's really more about just driving innovation and things like that. But to come back to your question, do I ever go to other parks? It's like, yeah, I mean, it's not so much that when I go to other theme parks, I look at them and say, oh, I could do this different or that different. I mean, certainly that just naturally kind of comes to me. Most of the time, it's spent observing what's been done and how they did it, and trying to learn something new. I mean, even like small parks here in Europe that don't, obviously, they don't have like the big Disney budgets and everything, but sometimes that's an advantage because, as we say, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And if you don't have a lot of money, it kind of forces you to think creatively on how to get something done differently and make it fun and effective. So a lot of times I'll kind of like try and look and see how they've solved their challenges or problems. And then I'll find the manager, I'll give my card and say, hey, just kidding. So for me, it's more of a learning experience when I go to these other parks. It's, you know, I'll tell you a little secret here. It's not always about like the newest technology, right? Sometimes you need to fall back. Pablo Picasso once said, every act of creation is first an act of destruction. And what he meant by that is that to create something new, first you need to be able to like break it down to its most fundamental, basic components. And once you understand the basis of it, then your brain is free to kind of take that and build up something new. And the same thing is really true in theme parks as well. If you go into the Haunted Mansion, right, a lot of you, whether it's here or Paris or wherever, you go into the Haunted Mansion and you see the ghosts in there. People to this day will swear those are like some kind of like hologram or new technology that, wow. And the way do you want me to tell you how they make the ghosts? Right? I'm gonna like rip off the Band-Aid a little bit, kind of destroy the pixie dust. It's an effect that's over 100 years old, goes back to the early days of stage and theater. It's called Pepper's Ghost. And basically what you're looking at when you see those ghosts, you're looking at reflections. So as your ride vehicle is going across and you're looking down into the banquet room where all the ghosts are dancing or eating or whatever they're doing, you're actually looking through a big sheet of glass that's just maybe 5 feet in front of you. Now, because you're looking down there and you don't expect, you're not, you know, thinking about, you never even perceive or see that glass, right? It's invisible for all intents and purposes. But what you're looking at are reflections. It's like if you stand in front of like a glass door, right? And you see your reflection in front of you, same exact thing. We have mannequins underneath of all those ghost characters, and because of the way they're lit and the angles and where they're placed, reflecting off of that glass that you're looking through, that's how you see those ghosts. So it's not always about using something new and shiny, and you know, sometimes the old tricks work the best. And it's amazing to me how well that effect that's maybe 150 years old is still being used, right, in the Disney theme parks. And they use it because it works. So.
Well, we don't have time for more questions, but let's thank Brian again for an awesome and inspiring talk.
Thank you. Thank you.